Hello, this is Cherisse LaSalle, an associate trainer for Art2Ride. This is my 9-year-old off-track thoroughbred Charlie, who I've been training according to Art2Ride for a little over a year and a half now. And this is our January 2018 submission. Charlie has been diagnosed with kissing spines, which means that the vertical processes in his spine do touch on occasion. This mostly happens when the horse hollows his back, although it can sometimes occur when they're standing in a neutral position. The good news is that when the horse lifts and rounds their back, the vertical processes actually fan out and more space is between them, which means that we can help horses with kissing spines by using this training method. I have a great deal of hope for Charlie that he will certainly get to the point where he feels better than he does now, and I hope that someday he will be pain-free. Currently, his pain level varies day to day. I can tell how much pain he has by palpating his back, and often I'll see a lot of muscle spasms. But the good news is that every time he works over his back feels significantly better after the work. I also have been using the Masterson method massage, and I do have a massage therapist work on him occasionally to help with some of the muscle spasms and the back pain that he has. As you can see in this session, I am doing pseudo work in hand, so I don't have reins on Charlie, I have the lunge line on him. This is because Charlie is pretty difficult in the arena for changing equipment. Now, if I had a horse that was very calm and easy to change equipment, I would start out with reins because it's much more effective to do the work in hand with reins rather than a single lunge line. However, this being Charlie's situation, it's perfectly fine to do the work in hand this way. So the goal here in this work in hand is to get Charlie to walk actively, first and foremost, and then to get him to take a nice deep step under the center of his body with his inside hind leg, because that will push his back up, which will result in a really nice stretch. We want to see their head and neck stretch forwards and downwards, and ideally the nose should poke out. Fortunately, Charlie is not a horse that goes behind the vertical. I don't think he's ever been crammed into any kind of frame because he was a racehorse prior to me owning him. So I try to use my body language to communicate to Charlie that I really want him to take a nice active step. Sometimes I over-exaggerate by walking really, really fast. And you'll see this a few times throughout the video because that energy that I bring, Charlie feeds off of that and he realizes that I want him to walk faster and then I don't have to use my whip so much. You'll see that it looks like I'm using my whip an awful lot, but I'm actually not touching him with it most of the time. I touch him with it when I need to, but I try to point when possible to encourage him to step over and under with the inside hind leg with the least amount of pressure possible. And since Charlie is a sensitive horse, a lot of times I can use a vocal cue or a point with the whip and he responds to that. We always want to use the lightest pressure possible with a horse because that's the kindest way to work with them. So you'll probably notice that when his head pops up, I ask him with my whip to step a little deeper under his body with that inside hind leg. Sometimes I'll bring him on a circle or even half a circle to try and get that inside hind leg to step under. And there's a nice stretchy walk. He's starting to release some tension. The one thing I've been focusing a lot on with Charlie lately is his activity level. Now that I know he has kissing spines and he really doesn't have much arthritis at all, I know that he's capable of doing better, and I just need to convince him that it's going to be for his own good that he move more actively, because the more I can get him active and pushing up through his back, the better his back is ultimately going to feel. But it's very difficult to convey that to a horse who doesn't understand why his back hurts and doesn't understand why we want them to work anyways. So we have to try to make it as pleasant as possible for them and reward them for every effort, and just try to convince him that this work is actually good and relaxing and will feel good. The cool thing is that although Charlie's a pretty quiet, calm horse, he has been very, very anxious about work ever since I got him. Up until just maybe the last 6 months, he's started to really just mentally calm down about the work. Now, when we come into the arena, most days it only takes maybe 5 to 10 minutes to get him to a mentally relaxed state. Whereas the first year that I worked with him, every day in the arena, it would take us 15 to 20 minutes just to get him to start mentally relaxing. And I think he's finally beginning to realize that the work is, not stressful, and that it's relaxing, and that it makes him feel better. It's a really awesome feeling when he comes in to the arena and within 5 minutes he's snorting and blowing out and releasing all his tension, and his eyes just get very soft, and it's just such a rewarding thing to see him finally realizing that he doesn't need to be a racehorse. He's gonna have a much better life now. Not that all racing is bad. I do think it causes them a lot of stress. So here we're getting a pretty nice active pace. He's taking a pretty good step. His head's still coming up quite a bit more than I would like to see. And this particular day, Charlie was on edge from the beginning, and you will see that when another horse comes into the arena, he really feeds off her tension. And we have quite an interesting session, very not typical session. So, as trainers, we have to just kind of assess our horse's attitude for the day and do the best we can, and not get frustrated that maybe they're not stretching as much as they usually do. It's okay as long as we are able to get them to lift their back and able to get some good work out of the session. It's a win. So I do have, working hand sessions that are significantly better than this, where he is able to stay in the stretch a lot longer and keep his back lifted up a lot better. But we're having some really good moments here nonetheless. Like there, he's getting it and there. So as I was mentioning earlier, I've been working on Charlie's activity level. And by that, I mean, I used to let him stretch and get very, very slow, which is fine in the beginning when you're teaching a horse to stretch and they don't even know how to stretch. It's okay to let them slow down, because for one thing, they don't have the strength to do the stretch any faster than what they're probably doing. So you have to give them some time to kind of build up the muscles and the flexibility and the trust also in you of what you want them to do. But Charlie has been doing this long enough that I really need him to start pushing from behind. I really need him to start coming off his forehand and really push up through his back And now that I know that he is kissing the spines, which I have been suspecting for a long time, but now that I know that it's a fact, I feel very strongly that he needs to get his back lifted in order for him to heal. Usually when he goes down this long side, he does a good job of lifting his back and relaxing. So although he's not stretching as low as I would like to see, I do think he's still taking, nice big steps. He's still pushing up through his back to some degree. So, as a trainer, you do have to keep an eye on your horse's back more than anything else, because even if their head isn't as low as you would like, they still might be lifting their back a little bit. Of course, we always aim for the deepest stretch because that's where you're going to get the most lift in the back, and that's where you're going to get the best work from them. But it's all degrees, it's all incremental, getting it a little better every day. And that was pretty nice. There. He's starting to push through a little more. He's just beginning to understand what a shoulder in is. So down that long side, I was kind of asking for sort of a shoulder in, and it really did help him. Now this other horse comes into the arena, and you will see shortly here that she has a lot of tension on this day, and so Charlie feeds off of that tension, and you will see one of Charlie's not so great days. But, really, he was not bad at all. Charlie, even on a bad day, is not a terribly difficult horse. You can see that Charlie's a bit scruffy. He's got his winter coat, and he's lost some hair in some places because his blanket doesn't quite fit. So it gives him shoulder rubs. I have not been able to find a blanket that doesn't give him shoulder rubs. And so he looks a little rough. So as you can see here, when that horse down at the other end of the arena started running around, Charlie got very excitable. And I had not asked for that trot, so I was a little confused because I didn't know what was going on down there. And then I realized, and so we just went back to the work in hand, no big deal. But he's really paying attention to that horse down there. So I asked him to stop, and boy, he's put on so much muscle. He looks fantastic. I had a friend of mine at the barn mention to me just last week when I was riding Charlie, she said, he just looks like a completely different horse. He's put on so much muscle. He looks fantastic. Charlie sometimes gets a little fussy about me messing with his head for the lunging, and like I mentioned earlier, he's not too keen on me changing the tack or the equipment during a session. So I have to be a little bit, I kind of have to outsmart him sometimes. And I also try to go up and pet him on the head and touch his ears, touch his mane, and then release that pressure by stepping back and just that way he can get used to it and see that it's not a big deal. And what you saw just there with me cracking the whip on the ground, I was trying to get his attention back because he really wasn't wanting to pay attention to me. He was wanting to pay attention to the other horse. So I was basically saying, Charlie, I need you to move and I need you to listen and we need to work because this is what's going to help you. So I start off in a rather small circle for him because I knew that he was tense. So I really wanted to keep him a little bit closer to me so that I could affect his body more. Right there I had to use a little bit stronger of a rein aid to kind of keep him, focused and help him to step under his body with the inside hind leg by not allowing him to go out too far. But I'm going to let him go out on a bigger circle as soon as I can. I just have to kind of wait until he's responding the way I need him to. And here he has a mini explosion, which that was really minor compared to some of the explosions he has had in the past. And I kind of knew it was going to happen. So when he did that, I just took a little bit more contact with my line and asked him to yield his hindquarters and send him forward. But you do have to be careful how much you send him forward because he's already tense. So if I send him too strongly forward, then, you could make the explosion even worse. So you want to get them back to a calm place. But you first have to show them that if they're going to run around and be wild and be hollow, it's going to be more work. And then once they come and relax like he is now, I loosen up on my line. I give him, releases with the line, and I allow him a break. So I think this is a good learning opportunity. Anytime things don't go perfectly, we can learn a lot from them. So you can see here how Charlie is struggling to focus. And although he's getting some really nice moments, his head is still popping up quite a bit throughout this session. Although here he's doing pretty good. Yeah, that's nice. That's nice. You can see the tension in his body. Even though he's moving nicely and he's lifting his back and he's lowering his head, you can still see there's some tension there. So it's going to be a bit of work to try to get that tension, get him to let go of that tension because of what the other horse is doing. But that was really lovely right there. So I'm really trying to send him forward. You see me using my whip quite a bit here because I really need him to pay attention, and I really need him to be active enough that he's able to push his back up. And I'm asking also at times for him to swing his hindquarters out a little bit so that he steps under better. I've been really impressed by how much bigger of a stride he's taking now than how he used to move at the trot. So, he cantered there, and I didn't want him to canter, so I just make the circle smaller so it's a bit harder for him to canter, and then I keep driving his hindquarters slightly out so that he has to step under his belly and push that back up, because that will put him in a position where he almost has to work correctly. Like, it doesn't force him to, but you really set them up for success when you do that, because you're basically asking their inside hind leg to step further under the center of their body, which will push the back up, which will eventually result in a stretch. See? He's moving much better now. And he's starting to let go of some of that tension. The horse down at the other end is a lot calmer at the moment, so he's not so worried. He's moving quite nicely now. And some of his head coming up is me asking him to increase the activity a little bit, and he a lot of times will respond by throwing his head, because it's very difficult for him still. At this point, he seems to be still really struggling to trot with his back engaged. So I've only been doing this for kind of a short time. I don't know exactly how many weeks, but I haven't really been lunging him in the trot for very long yet, and we've been, gradually working up. I think we do maybe about 10 minutes each side now, and I do it maybe once or twice a week, and then the other days we do work in hand, and one day of work in hand and riding. So he's doing a good job here. He's starting to calm down. He's moving better and better. That's nice. See how, his stride gets much better when he lowers his head to a little below his knees. He looks much more bouncy and swingy. There, that's really nice. And look how much bigger of a stride he's taking. I posted a couple pictures. I posted a screenshot from this video and compared it to a screenshot from my very first submission of Charlie back in 2016. And wow, what a difference in his trot. His old trot was terribly short-strided and very on the forehand. And now he's actually beginning to come off his forehand a little bit. Not always, but, at times he's having moments where he's able to come off his forehand a little, and his stride has gotten significantly longer as he's developed the muscle that he needs to be able to move better. He is moving better. So it's so important for people who are new to the Art2Ride training to understand that this takes a very long time, and you just have to be patient that it will come if you put in the hours, but it's going to take a while for your horse to develop the strength to really move the best that they can. And a horse like Charlie that has a lot of problems, had a lot of problems in the beginning, it's taken him a lot longer than it would take a regular horse that didn't have problems. And because of his kissing spines, it's going to be a significantly slower journey, which is perfectly fine with me. Charlie is a wonderful horse, and he's got a fantastic personality, and he's just so fun. I mean, I think if I can get him to the point where he's pain-free, it'll be phenomenal for both of us. We'll just be so happy. And like I said, every time he comes out and works over his back, he feels so much better afterwards. So that's what really encourages me that this is absolutely the right thing to be doing with this horse. And if anybody out there sees this video and you have a horse with kissing spines or back pain, I highly recommend you give Art2Ride a try, because I've seen it do wonders for Charlie, and we're not even finished yet. I mean, he still has so far to go, and I think he's going to continue to get better and better. And I'm asking him to continue to be active in the walk and to step under with that inside hind leg. He doesn't, that's good. He doesn't respond as well in the lunging walk work. He really responds much better when I do work in hand or pseudo work in hand. And that just kind of shows you that Charlie, I don't think it's so much that he's lazy as it is that he is still not quite convinced that he wants to work. Because he's still not quite convinced that working is going to make him feel better all of the time, which it does. And so he's starting to see that. But I just want you to see how incredibly much better this is than, he's still throwing his head here a little bit. The reason why he's doing that is because he wants to scratch his head. His head gets kind of itchy sometimes. And so I didn't let go of his bridle until he held his head still, and then I let go of it and gave him a pat and gave him a treat. But it used to be such an ordeal to try to switch the lunge line over his pole. It would probably take us a good 5 minutes to do it, because he would just keep walking off and throwing his head, and it was just very, very difficult. So I also purposefully make it take a long time and touch his pole, touch his ears, to try to show him that he doesn't need to worry about it. And when he responds by standing quietly, I give him treats. And he's really come around about this issue. He's so much better than he used to be. I mean, that was 1,000,000 times easier than it used to be. I think, it's like Will said, you have to give the horse a reason to want to be around you. You have to make sure that they enjoy what they're doing and enjoy spending time with you. And sometimes as people, we kind of forget that maybe they wouldn't want to do certain things. So as a trainer, it's our job to figure out how to incentivize them and how to make them enjoy it. And he's throwing his head a little bit, and you can still see he's kind of tense. But I'm really asking him to step over with that inside hind leg and keep trotting actively. And I'm trying very hard to keep a steady but soft contact with the lunge line. And there, the whip actually touched him like right above his hock, where it should touch. And he is such a drama queen. He acted like he like dropped his legs out from under him. I barely touched him with it. I mean, he's very sensitive to the whip. Like he does not like it to touch him, which is why you'll see me a lot of times kind of whipping the ground, which I know you're not really supposed to do it that way, but it seems to help Charlie if I give him the opportunity to not touch him with the lash. Although, when you reach out and touch them with the lash, it's a very light touch. It's not extremely painful or anything. I mean, I've hit myself with the whip and I know what it feels like. It's not anything to cry about. So you can see that we're trying to work through Charlie's tensions. We're trying to get a better trot going. I'm trying to get him to stretch down, but he's still pretty tense. And okay, so I asked for this canter because I wanted you to see how terrible this canter is. And I just wanted to have some video of his canter because I do believe that it's going to get a lot better. And so I want to have some proof that it was absolutely awful. But I don't canter him on purpose, aside from this one time, because it's just awful. I mean, he goes completely hollow and he looks extremely uncomfortable. So I really don't ask him to canter at this stage in his training. We don't want to be doing anything that's going to negate all the work that we're trying to do. So when he throws his head up and goes hollow in the canter, it's kind of like taking 2 steps backwards. But I feel that it's necessary to have some video footage of it for the future. So now we're back to trot, and I'm trying to get him to lift and engage his back and stretch down and calm down. I think it's nice for you guys to be able to see Charlie on a day that was not great for him, because my videos in the past have shown his typical, very calm and relaxed attitude. But I do, occasionally have days with him that are like this, where he's pretty tense and there's a lot of head tossing and tail swishing, and I think it's always beneficial to see the difficult days. A lot of times even more helpful than seeing the good days, because it's helpful to see how someone works through that. And it's also good to keep in mind that every horse is different, so what works for Charlie may or may not work for your horse. You just got to experiment with it and see, if you try sending them on a little more, will that help the situation, or will they explode even worse? And if they do explode even worse, how then should you handle that? Like, it's a lot of problem solving on the spot, and a lot of, building up your years of experience. I have a lot of years of working with horses, and so I kind of have some intuition about some things. I still have a lot to learn, but it's good to keep in mind, if you don't have a lot of experience training horses, be patient with yourself, because you're not going to know necessarily how to respond, and that's okay, because you'll figure it out as you go. And if you really get stuck, we're always here to help you with any questions. There, he's starting to move better. You can see him licking and chewing, and you can tell that he's starting to release some of that tension. There. That's better. There. Oh, you lost it. I'm just very impressed with how much better he's moving than how he used to. I mean, even in this video where he's quite tense and throwing his head a lot, he looks still so much better than he used to. How he's moving in the trot, he's taking those much bigger strides. He's actually able to lift his back much more than he could before. And there I brought him in on a smaller circle because I'm trying to get him to step under with that inside hind leg and push up through his back. And look how nicely, oh, he lost it again. So, this is very normal for you to kind of have moments where it's really, really nice and then have moments where they lose it. It's not something to get overly upset about. There. Okay, so then I asked him to walk because I felt like, being the type of horse that he is, he would appreciate a short walk break. Now, it depends on your horse, and most of the time we want to keep them in the trot for the full length of the trot work because you don't want them to break out of the zone. Like, you want to keep them in the zone and keep them, moving forward and all of that. But with Charlie, he really appreciates a break. So sometimes if I feel like he's really trying hard, but he's getting kind of frustrated or, it just doesn't seem to be getting better, sometimes I will ask him to walk for like one circle around just to kind of give him a quick break and hopefully refresh him to come back to the work. And as you can see here, he seems to be working a little better now. So I think that was the right decision on this day. Look at that. Really nice. Really getting better. And some of the times when you see him throw his head up, it's because I'm asking him to become a little more active. And at this point, it's still really hard for him to become more active in the stretch. So a lot of times he responds by throwing his head up. And after watching this video, I decided that I should probably lunge him in the shanbone because he's spending too much time with his head above his knees. And I really would like to keep him in that deep stretch in the trot work, because that's how he's going to really build the muscle that he needs, and that's how he's really going to make his back feel better. He's getting really nice. He's getting really loose, and so I must have felt that was as good as we were going to get that day. So I asked him to walk, and when I ask him to walk after the trot on the lunge, he frequently thinks the work is done. So I've been trying to kind of retrain that and help him to know that when we go down to the walk in the lunge work, it doesn't necessarily mean that he's done. And I want him to stay active, and I want him to stay out on the end of my lunge line, which you'll see some slack from time to time because he tends to come in towards me. And so I keep asking him to step out with his hindquarters, and I'm still asking him to lift his back and stretch. He does a much better job of lifting his back and stretching. Oh, that was nice. In the work in hand than he does in the lunging. And so you keep seeing his head pop up because I'm asking him to be more active. That's a little better. That's nice. And as you watch the horse move, it's important to watch their back and their hind legs. even though their head and neck is much more distracting and much more attractive, we need to focus on what the hind legs are doing. We need to focus on if the back is lifting, because that's the most important thing. It really doesn't matter where their head and neck is if they're not using their hindquarters and their back and pushing from behind. Because in classical dressage, we know that everything must come from the hind end. There, that's nice. So he doesn't really need a super long cool down because he really didn't get sweaty. I mean, that amount of trotting didn't work him up into any kind of lather or anything. Like he could probably be done now, but the reason I'm continuing to walk him, like I said, is because I want him to understand that when we come down to a walk, it doesn't mean that he's done. And I really want to get some more good stretches. I want to end the session on a good relaxed note, because the whole session was a little bit tense, a little more tense than I would like. And we had, some really beautiful moments in there where he was moving really nicely, but it was a difficult day for him because the other horse was tense. There. He gives me, a stretch, and then he pops his head right back up. But I try to find a really good moment to stop him where I feel like he's trying really hard. And you can see now that he's quite itchy. So that's what I was saying earlier, when he was throwing his head, when I was trying to change the lunge line over, I knew that the reason why he was throwing his head was because he wanted to itch his head. And that's just helpful to know, because then I don't get quite so frustrated because I understand what his issue is. I think as humans, we tend to get a little caught up on, oh, my horse is just being a pain. And now that I've worked with horses as long as I have, I am 100% positive that horses don't think that way. They have their own wants and their own needs, and those may not line up with what we want, but they don't sit around thinking up ways to drive us crazy. So if you think your horse is just trying to drive you crazy, I would really suggest you do some investigating, because that's probably not the case. There probably is a legitimate reason why they're doing the thing that they're doing. If you could figure out what it is, you might be able to fix the problem. He was very itchy. So thanks so much for watching, and if you have any questions, feel free to get in touch with me via Facebook or my website. Best of luck to you with training your own horse.